Good evening, friends, and welcome back to Boring History for Sleep. Before we begin, I'd love to ask, where are you listening from tonight? What country do you call home? And what time is it there as you settle in? Perhaps it's late, like it is here, or maybe the sun is just beginning to rise. Wherever you are, let's drift together into the ancient world of Mesopotamia, where the very first stories ever written were carved into clay tablets by flickering lamplight, much like the soft glow that might be illuminating your room right now. Take a moment to dim your lights if you haven't already, and settle yourself under your blanket. Let yourself sink into whatever comfortable position feels just right. We're about to journey back over 4,000 years to a time when the world was young and mysterious, when gods walked among mortals and every natural phenomenon had a story to explain it. These tales from ancient Mesopotamia aren't just dusty old myths, they're humanity's first attempts to make sense of the world, told with such timeless beauty that they still carry the power to soothe us into peaceful dreams. If this calm journey through ancient stories helps you unwind and drift toward sleep, feel free to tap like and subscribe, but only if it feels right. Only if these whispered tales from long ago bring you the peace you're seeking tonight. Now, close your eyes if you'd like, and let your breathing slow as we travel back to the land between two rivers, where civilization itself was born, and where tonight's gentle stories are waiting to carry you into the most restful sleep. Let me tell you about a time before time, when the world was nothing but endless water and endless sky, and somewhere in between floated the dreams of gods who had not yet learned to sleep. Picture this moment, if you will not, the chaotic crash of creation myths from other cultures, but something softer, like the gentle lapping of waves against a distant shore you can barely hear in the beginning. There was Apsu, the freshwater ocean that lay beneath everything, and Tiamat, the saltwater sea that surrounded everything, and between them flowed currents of possibility that moved slower than your breathing tonight. Imagine the sound, not rushing or violent, but the kind of soft, rhythmic whooshing that you might hear in a conch shell, or in the white noise machine humming quietly in the corner of someone's bedroom. From this primordial calm came Enki, though he wasn't called that at first. He emerged like steam rising from a warm bath, taking form gradually, thoughtfully, the way sleep itself sometimes approaches, not all at once, but seeping in around the edges of consciousness, until suddenly you realize you've been dreaming all along. Enki was the god of fresh water, of wisdom, and of all the gentle crafts that make life sweet and comfortable. Picture him now, not as some imposing deity with thunderbolts and drama, but more like the world's first craftsperson, sitting by a quiet stream in the early morning light, working clay between his fingers with the same meditative rhythm you might use to knead bread, dough, or stroke a cat's fur. The other gods were restless in those early days, always arguing about boundaries and territories and who should rule what. But Enki had a different idea entirely. While they debated in their celestial halls, and imagine those halls like the kind of vast, echoing spaces that make you want to whisper, Enki was down by the water's edge, experimenting with creation the way a patient gardener experiments with different ways to help seeds grow. He started small, as the best creators always do. First, he made reeds that grew in the shallows, swaying gently back and forth, like metronomes, marking time in the most peaceful tempo imaginable. The sound they made when the breeze touched them was something between a sigh and a song, the kind of natural music that makes your shoulders automatically relax. Then came his greatest inspiration, the idea that would change everything. He would create a place where beings could experience rest. Not just the absence of activity, but true rest, the kind that refreshes the soul and makes morning light feel like a gift rather than an obligation. Working with clay from the riverbank, clay that had been smoothed by countless seasons of gentle current, Enki began shaping the first garden. But this wasn't like the rigid, formal gardens you might picture when you think of ancient palaces. This was organic, flowing, designed according to principles of comfort rather than ceremony. He planted trees whose leaves whispered lullabies when touched by even the slightest breeze. Between their roots, he encouraged the growth of moss so soft that lying upon it felt like resting on clouds made solid. The flowers he cultivated bloomed in colors that seemed to glow with their own inner light, not harsh or bright, but warm and comforting, like candlelight filtered through amber glass. The centerpiece of this garden was a spring that bubbled up from the deepest part of Apsu's realm. The water that flowed from it had properties unlike any water that had existed before. It wasn't just refreshing, it carried within it the essence of peaceful sleep. The way certain chamomile teas seem to contain drowsiness itself, or the way the sound of rain on a roof can make your eyelids heavy without you even realizing it's happening. Enki spent what mortals would later measure as months or years, though time moved differently then, more like honey than like the quick tick of digital clocks, perfecting every detail of this sanctuary. He adjusted the angle of branches so that shadows fell in just the right patterns. He guided streams so that their gentle murmuring would create natural harmonies. He even influenced the way starlight filtered down through the canopy, ensuring that night in his garden felt like being wrapped in the softest possible blanket. When the garden was complete, Enki realized it needed inhabitants who could truly appreciate what he had created. The other gods were too restless, too caught up in their cosmic responsibilities and eternal dramas. So he returned to his clay, but this time he worked with different intentions. These new beings would be designed for rest, for contemplation, for the simple pleasure of existing peacefully within the beauty he had crafted. He shaped them carefully, taking inspiration from the most graceful creatures that had already emerged in the world: the curve of a swan's neck, the gentle strength of a deer's legs, the soft warmth of a dove's breast. But most importantly, he gave them the capacity for dreams, relaxed its grip, and allowed imagination to flow freely. Each figure he created carried within it a universe of possible dreams, stories that would emerge only in sleep, only in that liminal space where the boundaries between real and imagined become beautifully blurred. When he breathed life into these first dream beings, they opened their eyes slowly, blinking like people waking from the most restful nap, already carrying within them the knowledge that sleep was not just necessary, but sacred. They understood intuitively that dreams were gifts, messages from the deep wells of wisdom that could only be accessed when the busy mind finally agreed to be still. The garden became a place of perfect balance. During the daylight hours, its inhabitants would tend the plants with gentle attention, moving slowly and purposefully, never hurrying, never straining. They discovered that flowers responded better to patience than to force. That fruit ripened more sweetly when allowed to follow its own timeline rather than being rushed. And when evening came, they would gather by the spring that bubbled with sleep-inducing water. They would drink small sips not to escape consciousness, but to enhance it, to prepare their minds for the rich dream journeys that awaited. Then they would find their favorite resting spots among the soft moss and let themselves drift into sleep that was deeper and more restorative than anything we experience now in their dreams. They traveled to other worlds, learned secrets from wise animals who spoke in colors instead of words, and discovered solutions to problems they didn't even know they had. They would wake refreshed, not just in body, but in spirit, carrying with them insights that made their waking hours richer and more meaningful. Enki would often walk among them in the evening hours, not as a ruler checking on subjects, but as an artist admiring his work, as a gardener pleased to see that what he had planted was flourishing beyond his wildest hopes. The soft sounds of their peaceful breathing, the gentle rustle of leaves responding to their dream movements, the quiet splash of the spring, all of these combined to create a symphony of contentment that even the other gods began to notice. And perhaps, as you lie there now, letting your own breathing slow and deepen, you're experiencing just a tiny echo of what Enki's first dream beings felt in that perfect garden. Perhaps somewhere in the quiet of your room, in the gentle weight of your blanket, in the soft darkness behind your closed eyelids, you can sense the whisper of that ancient spring, still offering its gift of peaceful rest to anyone wise enough to accept it. The story goes that this garden existed outside of ordinary time and space, which means it might exist still, waiting for those who know how to find it, not through travel, but through the simple act of surrendering to sleep with the same trust and openness that Enki built into his very first dreamers. And as we leave that warm garden where dreams first took root, let your mind wander now to another story, one that unfolds under vast desert skies where shepherds once watched their flocks by night, guided by constellations that seemed close enough to touch. This is the tale of Dumuzid, though he's known by many names across many cultures. And tonight we'll discover how his story became the foundation for humanity's understanding of the sacred rhythm between waking and sleeping, between seasons of activity and seasons of deep rest. Picture, if you will, the landscape of ancient Sumer on a clear night in early spring. The air carries that perfect coolness that makes you want to wrap a light shawl around your shoulders and sit outside just a little longer, watching the way moonlight turns everything silver and soft. Across the rolling hills, scattered fires mark the camps of shepherds who have been following these same paths for generations, reading the stars like a familiar book, knowing exactly which constellation's appearance means it's time to move the flocks to higher ground, which means it's time to return to the lowlands. Dumuzid was the greatest of these shepherds, though when you first met him, you might not have realized there was anything particularly special about him. He was young, with the kind of easy smile that comes from spending most of your time outdoors, and hands that were gentle enough to coax a frightened lamb from a thicket, but strong enough to wrestle a grown sheep away from danger. His voice, when he sang to calm the animals, during long nights, had the quality of warm honey mixed with starlight, soothing and sweet, with something mysterious stirring underneath. What made Dumusid different from other shepherds wasn't his skill with animals, though that was considerable. It wasn't even his uncanny ability to predict weather changes days in advance by reading subtle shifts in how the sheep moved and grazed. What set him apart was his relationship with sleep itself, with the deep restorative power that flowed through all living things when they surrendered to rest. Dumusid had discovered something that most people never learn, that there's a difference between ordinary sleep and sacred sleep, between the kind of rest that simply recharges your body and the kind that connects you to the deeper rhythms of existence itself. He had learned this not through study or teaching, but through years of lying under the open sky, synchronizing his breathing with the gentle snores of hundreds of sheep, letting his consciousness expand and contract with the phases of the moon. On nights when the flocks were settled and safe, Dumusid would climb to the highest hill in the area, not to get a better view of potential dangers, but to commune with what he called the shepherd of stars, the invisible presence that he believed watched over all earthly shepherds, the way shepherds watched over their flocks. He would lie on his back in the soft grass, arms spread wide, and let himself become a bridge between earth and sky, between the solid comfort of the ground beneath him and the infinite mystery spinning slowly overhead. In these moments of perfect stillness, Dumusid would enter a state that was deeper than ordinary sleep, but more refreshing than any rest he had ever experienced. His consciousness would seem to float free of his body, drifting upward like smoke from a dying campfire, until he could see himself from above, a small figure on a hillside, surrounded by the gentle white shapes of sleeping sheep, all of them breathing in harmony, all of them connected by invisible threads of peace. From this elevated perspective, Dumusid began to understand that sleep wasn't just something that happened to individuals, it was a collective experience, a way that all living things participated in the great cosmic rhythm of expansion and contraction, activity and rest that kept the universe itself in balance. The sheep slept, and in sleeping they dreamed of green pastures and cool streams. The grass slept, and in sleeping it dreamed itself deeper into the earth, growing stronger roots. Even the stones slept, and in their ancient dreams they remembered being part of mountains, part of riverbed, part of the deep foundations of the world. Night after night, Dumusid practiced this sacred form of rest, and gradually he began to develop abilities that seemed magical to others but felt completely natural to him. He could calm a panicked animal simply by placing his hand on its head and sharing with it the deep peace he carried within himself. He could predict which areas would have the best grazing by entering a light trance and letting his consciousness drift ahead of the flock, sensing the quality of grass and water in places he had never physically visited. Most remarkably, he could enter the dreams of others, not to control or manipulate, but simply to offer comfort. Shepherds from neighboring flocks began to seek him out, not just for practical advice about routes and weather, but because, somehow, after spending an evening talking with Dumusid, they would sleep more soundly than they had in months. Their dreams would be filled with gentle images, wide meadows under starlight, the sound of water flowing over smooth stones, the feeling of being completely safe and at peace. Word of Dumusta's unusual gifts eventually reached the goddess Inanna, who ruled over love and beauty and all the forces that made life worth living. Intrigued by stories of a shepherd who could grant peaceful dreams, she decided to visit him. Disguising herself as a traveler seeking shelter for the night, she found him where the stories had said she would, on a hillside under the stars, surrounded by his peacefully sleeping flock, looking as if he had grown from the earth itself rather than simply lying upon it. When she approached, he opened his eyes slowly, without startlement, as if he had been aware of her presence long before she became visible. "You're welcome to share our fire," he said, his voice carrying that same warm honey quality that had become legendary among the shepherds. "There's bread and cheese, and the sheep don't mind company as long as you move slowly and speak softly." Inanna had expected many reactions to her presence. Most mortals either threw themselves down in worship or ran away in terror when they encountered a goddess, even a disguised one. But Dumusid simply offered hospitality with the same calm generosity he might show to any weary traveler. And somehow this touched something in her divine heart that she hadn't known was there. They spent the night talking quietly by the dying fire, and Inanna found herself sharing thoughts and feelings that she had never spoken aloud before. There was something about Dumusid's presence that made confession feel safe, made vulnerability feel like strength rather than weakness. He listened with his whole being, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but truly receiving her words, the way deep soil receives rain, as the fire burned lower and the stars wheeled overhead. Inanna realized that what she was experiencing was a form of love she had never encountered before, not the passionate, consuming fire that most associated with her domain, but something deeper and more sustaining, the kind of love that created safe spaces where souls could be completely vulnerable and completely protected at the same time. When she finally revealed her true identity, Dumusid received this information with the same calm acceptance he brought to everything else. "I wondered," he said simply, "but it didn't seem to matter. You needed what anyone needs at the end of a long day, a place to rest, someone to listen, a sense of being welcomed exactly as you are." Their courtship, when it began, was unlike anything in the stories gods usually told about themselves. Instead of grand gestures and dramatic declarations, it unfolded slowly, gently, like a flower opening in response to perfect conditions rather than force. They would meet on hilltops under starlight, sharing not just words but silences, not just passion but peace. Dumusid taught Inanna about the sacred nature of rest, while she awakened in him an appreciation for the sacred nature of joy, of celebration, of the bright energy that made rest meaningful. But the most beautiful aspect of their relationship was how they learned to sleep together, not just sharing physical space, but synchronizing their consciousness in that deep realm where individual identity dissolves into something larger and more encompassing. In their shared dreams, they became the archetypal lovers, the template for all earthly partnerships that would ever find true peace in each other's presence. Their dreams were so vivid, so filled with beauty and harmony, that they began to spill over into the waking world. Shepherds throughout the region reported that their flocks were healthier, their pastures more abundant. Artists found their creativity flowing more freely. Couples discovered new depths of understanding, and affection. It was as if the love between a goddess and a shepherd was creating ripples of peace that spread far beyond their personal experience. And, perhaps most remarkably, people began to sleep better. Not just the shepherds and their families, but merchants in the cities, farmers in their fields, children in their cradles, all of them began to experience the kind of deep, restorative rest that left them waking, refreshed, not just in body, but in spirit. Night became a time of renewal rather than simply an interruption of activity, and dreams became messengers carrying wisdom from the deep places of the soul. Even now, thousands of years later, on quiet nights when the stars seem especially bright and the air carries that perfect coolness that makes you want to linger outside just a little longer, some say you can still feel the echo of that sacred love, still catch a whisper of the peace that demused, and as you settle deeper into your own rest tonight, letting your breathing slow and your muscles relax, perhaps you're participating in that same ancient rhythm, that same sacred surrender to the healing power of sleep that connects all dreamers across all time. Now, let your mind wander to a different kind of sanctuary, one that exists not under open skies, but within walls lined with countless clay tablets, where the soft scratch of stylus against clay creates a rhythm as soothing as gentle rain on a roof. This is the story of Nabu, the god of writing and wisdom, and the incredible library he created not just for storing knowledge, but for preserving dreams themselves, a place where sleep became a form of learning, and learning became a pathway to the most peaceful rest imaginable. Picture the great temple complex at Borsippa, rising from the Mesopotamian plain like a mountain built of human ambition and divine inspiration. But our story takes us not to the grand ceremonial halls or the towering ziggurats that catch the eye from miles away, but to a quieter wing, where Nabu kept his personal collection of tablets, thousands upon thousands of them, organized not according to subject matter, as you might expect, but according to the quality of dreams they inspired when read just before sleep. Nabu himself was not like the other gods, who tended toward dramatic gestures and cosmic confrontations. He was quieter, more thoughtful, the kind of deity you might mistake for a dedicated librarian if you encountered him hunched over a reading table in the soft light of an oil lamp. His fingers were permanently stained with the clay dust that came from handling tablets all day, and he had developed the gentle, measured way of speaking that comes from years of trying not to disturb other people's concentration. But don't let his quiet demeanor fool you. Nabu possessed a form of power that was perhaps more profound than all the thunder and lightning his more dramatic relatives could summon. He had discovered that words, when arranged in just the right combinations, could alter consciousness as surely as any magic spell. More than that, he had learned that certain stories, read at the perfect moment of drowsiness, could guide readers into dreams so vivid and meaningful that they would wake up feeling as if they had lived entire lifetimes of wisdom in a single night's sleep. The library itself was designed according to principles that wouldn't be fully understood until thousands of years later, when scientists would study the connection between environment and brain states. The ceiling was painted a deep blue that seemed to deepen as evening approached, studded with tiny chips of lapis lazuli that caught and reflected lamplight like distant stars. The walls were curved slightly, creating subtle acoustic properties that made even whispered conversations seem to wrap around listeners like warm blankets. Most importantly, Nabu had arranged the reading areas according to what he called sleep gradients, spaces designed to gradually guide visitors from full alertness into progressively deeper states of relaxation. Near the entrance, chairs were upright and lighting was bright, perfect for studying complex philosophical or mathematical texts that required full concentration. As you moved deeper into the library, the furniture became more comfortable, the lighting softer, the very air seeming to grow thicker and more conducive to rest. At the heart of the library was Nabu's masterpiece, a circular room lined entirely with tablets that he had personally selected for their dream-inducing properties. These weren't just random stories or religious texts, but carefully crafted narratives that had been tested and refined over decades of observation. Each tablet was positioned at exactly the right height for someone reclining on the comfortable cushions scattered throughout the room, and each told a story designed to guide the reader's consciousness through specific stages of the journey toward sleep. The process of using Nabu's dream library was itself a form of meditation. Visitors would begin by consulting with Nabu himself, who would ask gentle questions about their current concerns, their recent sleep patterns, the kinds of images or themes that brought them comfort. Based on these consultations, he would prescribe a specific sequence of tablets, like a physician prescribing medicine, but instead of healing the body, he was prescribing healing for the restless mind. A typical evening might begin with a tablet containing what Nabu called settling stories, gentle narratives about peaceful journeys, descriptions of beautiful landscapes, tales of characters finding resolution to conflicts through patience and wisdom rather than force. These stories were designed to help readers release the tensions and preoccupations of their daily lives, creating mental space for deeper relaxation. As drowsiness began to set in, readers would progress to tablets containing what modern people might recognize as guided imagery, sensory descriptions of calm environments that the mind could use as foundations for peaceful dreams. One popular tablet described a garden where every flower sang a different lullaby, where streams flowed with water that carried away worries, where trees offered shade that was somehow deeper and more restorative than any earthly shadow. The final stage involved tablets with stories that were deliberately left incomplete, narratives that trailed off into mystery and suggestion rather than tidy conclusions. These were designed to engage the dreaming mind's natural tendency to complete patterns and solve puzzles, giving the unconscious something productive to work on during sleep, while ensuring that this mental activity remained gentle and non-stressful. But Nabu's most remarkable innovation was his collection of what he called linking tablets, stories that were specifically designed to be read by two or more people simultaneously, creating shared dream experiences. Couples would read these tablets together just before sleep, following narratives that had been crafted to synchronize their unconscious minds, allowing them to meet and interact within shared dreamscapes. These linking tablets became incredibly popular, not just among romantic partners, but among friends, family members, even business associates who wanted to collaborate on creative projects. There are records of entire merchant caravans reading linking tablets together before sleep, then waking to find that they had collectively dreamed solutions to complex logistical problems, or artists' guilds using them to inspire shared visions that would influence their work for months to come. One of the most beautiful aspects of Nabu's library was how it evolved over time. He encouraged visitors to contribute their own dream experiences, dictating to scribes the most vivid and meaningful dreams they had experienced after reading his tablets. These new stories would then be incorporated into the collection, creating a living, growing repository of human dream experience that became more powerful and effective. With each passing year, Nabu also developed what he called seasonal collections, different sets of tablets that were particularly effective during different times of the year. Summer tablets focused on stories of cool shade and flowing water, while winter tablets emphasized warmth, shelter, and the cozy comfort of being safely indoors while storms raged harmlessly outside. Spring tablets were full of stories about growth and renewal, while autumn tablets celebrated the satisfaction of completion, of harvest, of preparing for well-deserved rest. The god himself kept detailed records of which tablets were most effective for different types of people, gradually developing a sophisticated understanding of how personality, life experience, and current circumstances affected the dreaming mind. Farmers, he discovered, responded well to stories about cycles and seasons, while merchants preferred tales of successful journeys and profitable trades. Parents found peace in stories about children growing up safely and well, while scholars gravitated toward narratives about discovering hidden wisdom or solving ancient mysteries. Perhaps most remarkably, Nabu created special tablets for people who had difficulty sleeping, those whose minds raced with anxiety or whose bodies couldn't find comfort no matter how they positioned themselves. These tablets contained stories specifically designed to slow racing thoughts, narratives with rhythmic, repetitive elements that functioned almost like textual meditation, guiding restless minds toward the kind of peaceful focus that naturally flows into sleep. The reputation of Nabu's dream library spread throughout the ancient world, drawing visitors from distant lands who came seeking not just knowledge but rest, not just information but transformation. Many reported that a single night spent reading Nabu's tablets had given them better sleep than they had experienced in years, while others claimed that the dreams inspired by his stories had changed their entire approach to life. And in the deepest part of the library, in a small chamber that Nabu kept for his own use, there was a single tablet that he never allowed anyone else to read. This tablet contained what he believed was the perfect story, a narrative so precisely crafted, so perfectly attuned to the rhythm of the human mind settling toward sleep, that reading it would guarantee not just peaceful dreams, but prophetic ones, dreams that would reveal the future or unlock the deepest wisdom of the past. But Nabu, being wise as well as powerful, recognized that some gifts were too profound to share carelessly. He would read this tablet only occasionally, when the weight of divine responsibility became too heavy even for a god to bear, when he needed to reconnect with the source of all stories, the deep well of narrative possibility from which all dreams ultimately flow. As you lie there now, letting these words wash over you like gentle waves. Perhaps you can sense something of what those ancient dreamers experienced in Nabu's library. Perhaps in the rhythm of this story itself, in the way the words seem to slow and soften as they unfold. You're experiencing a distant echo of the gods' gift for crafting narratives that guide consciousness gently toward rest. And maybe, as your own thoughts begin to settle and your breathing deepens, you're discovering that the best stories don't just entertain us, they transform us, carrying us across the threshold between waking and sleeping, between knowing and dreaming, between the busy world of day and the peaceful sanctuary of night. And as we turn away from the tablet-lined halls where stories lived in clay, let your awareness drift now toward where the very air itself became a medium for peace, where winds were not wild or chaotic, but carefully crafted lullabies that could carry even the most restless spirit into perfect calm. This is the story of Enlil, the great god of air and atmosphere, and how he learned to transform his mighty power over storms and tempests into something far more subtle and beautiful, the ability to create breezes so perfectly attuned to the needs of sleeping beings that they became legendary throughout the ancient world. Imagine, if you will, the highest peak in all of Mesopotamia, a place that exists not quite in the physical world, but not quite in the realm of pure spirit, either somewhere in between. Like that drowsy state you're entering now, where reality becomes softer round the edges and anything seems possible. At the summit of this peak stood Enlil's palace, but it was unlike any earthly dwelling you might picture. Instead of walls and rooms, it was built entirely from air, itself currents and breezes woven together into chambers and corridors, somehow solid enough to provide shelter, yet remained as fluid and responsive as breath itself. Enlil had always been known as the most powerful of the wind gods, capable of summoning hurricanes that could level cities, or tornadoes that could reshape entire landscapes with their fury. His voice, when raised in anger, was the sound of thunder rolling across desert plains. His footsteps were the tremors that preceded earthquakes. Other gods approached him with respect tinged by wariness, never quite sure whether his next gesture would bring gentle spring rains or devastating storms. But there came a time when Enlil grew weary of his own power, tired of being feared rather than loved, exhausted by the responsibility of controlling forces so vast and potentially destructive. He began to spend long hours walking through his palace of woven air, listening to the subtle conversations that breezes had with each other when they thought no one was paying attention, learning the delicate language of currents and pressures that existed far below the threshold of dramatic weather. It was during these quiet wanderings that Enlil made a discovery that would change not just his own nature, but the very experience of sleep for countless beings throughout the world. He realized that air, like water, had moods and personalities that went far beyond simple temperature and humidity. Some breezes were naturally comforting, carrying within their movement the same kind of gentle rhythm that a parent might use when rocking a child to sleep. Others were energizing but not aggressive, like the kind of fresh morning air that makes you want to stretch and yawn and feel grateful for being alive. Most intriguingly, Enlil discovered that certain combinations of air currents could actually induce specific mental states in those who breathed them. A breeze that moved in slow, regular pulses would naturally encourage deeper breathing and muscle relaxation. Air that carried the faintest trace of certain flower fragrances could ease anxiety and promote feelings of safety and comfort. Currents that moved in subtle spirals seemed to help racing thoughts settle into more peaceful patterns. Fascinated by these discoveries, Enlil began to experiment with what he came to think of as atmospheric composition, the art of blending different types of breezes, the way a master chef might blend flavors, or a musician might blend harmonies. He started small, creating gentle air currents around his own palace that made visitors feel inexplicably welcome and at ease. Breezes that seemed to whisper encouragement and carry away worries without anyone quite realizing what was happening. The first mortals to experience Enlil's new approach to wind were the inhabitants of a small farming village that had been suffering from a plague of insomnia. For weeks, the entire population had been unable to sleep properly, not because of any physical illness or external threat, but due to some subtle disruption in the natural rhythms that normally guided communities toward rest. Children cried through the nights, adults tossed and turned until dawn, and even the animals seemed restless and uncomfortable. Word of their plight eventually reached Enlil, who decided to use the village as a testing ground for his theories about therapeutic air currents. Working with the same careful attention he had once devoted to crafting powerful storms, he began to weave a complex network of breezes around the village currents, so gentle and subtle that no one consciously noticed them, but so precisely calibrated that they began to have an almost immediate effect on the quality of sleep throughout the community. The breeze that flowed through bedroom windows carried just the right amount of coolness to encourage the deep relaxation that precedes sleep, while also maintaining perfect humidity levels that kept airways clear and comfortable. Air currents that circulated around cradles moved in rhythm with the natural breathing patterns of infants, helping them maintain steady sleep cycles throughout the night. Even the breezes that rustled through garden plants were carefully orchestrated to create natural white noise that masked disturbing sounds without being noticeable in itself. Within a week, the village had been transformed. Not only were people sleeping well again, but they were experiencing the kind of profound restorative rest that left them waking up feeling more refreshed and creative than they could remember being in years. Children's games became more imaginative and cooperative. Adults found themselves approaching their work with renewed enthusiasm and patience. Even conflicts that had been simmering for months seemed to resolve themselves naturally, as people rediscovered the clarity and goodwill that come from consistently good sleep. Word of this miracle spread quickly, and soon Enlil found himself inundated with requests from communities throughout the region, all hoping to benefit from his newfound mastery of sleep-inducing winds. But rather than simply repeating the same solution everywhere, Enlil took the time to study each location carefully, recognizing that different environments and populations would require different approaches for desert communities. He created cooling breezes that carried microscopic droplets of moisture, providing relief from the dry heat that often made sleep difficult in arid climates. For coastal villages, he learned to work with existing sea breezes, enhancing their natural calming properties, while filtering out the salt and humidity that could sometimes make sleep uncomfortable. Mountain communities received currents that carried the clean, thin air of high altitudes down to more comfortable levels, while still maintaining the crisp clarity that mountain dwellers had come to love. But Enlil's masterpiece was the creation of what he called dream winds, specialized air currents that could not only induce sleep but influence the quality and content of dreams themselves. These were far more complex than his standard sleep-inducing breezes, requiring him to weave together dozens of different atmospheric elements in patterns intricate that they resembled musical compositions more than weather phenomena. Dream winds, designed to inspire creativity, carried microscopic particles from flowering plants known for their association with artistic inspiration, while currents meant to promote healing dreams included trace elements from medicinal herbs. Breezes intended to encourage prophetic dreams were infused with the rarefied air from the highest mountain peaks, places where the boundary between earth and sky became thin and permeable. Perhaps most remarkably, Enlil developed techniques for creating memory winds, air currents that could help people process and integrate difficult experiences through their dreams. These therapeutic breezes carried within them the essence of plants and minerals, known for their ability to promote emotional healing, combined with subtle pressure variations that encouraged the kind of deep, REM-rich sleep during which the mind naturally works through unresolved issues and traumas. The process of creating these specialized winds required not just technical skill, but deep empathy and intuition. Enlil would spend hours in meditation before beginning any new project, extending his consciousness into the lives and needs of those who would be affected by his work. He learned to sense the difference between anxiety that came from external circumstances and anxiety that arose from deeper spiritual sources. He developed techniques for detecting the subtle energy signatures of grief, of fear, and corresponding methods for crafting air currents that could address each of these conditions with precision and compassion. Enlil began to attract students, other wind spirits, and minor deities who wanted to learn his techniques for therapeutic atmospheric work. He established what might have been the world's first school of meteorological healing, teaching others not just the technical aspects of wind manipulation, but the deeper principles of empathy and service that made such work truly effective. His advanced students learned to work in teams, creating what they called wind symphonies, complex, layered atmospheric compositions that could address the sleep needs of entire cities. These collaborative efforts could take weeks or even months to plan and execute properly, requiring careful coordination and timing that had to account for seasonal weather patterns, lunar cycles, and the specific cultural and geographical characteristics of each target population. As we drift away from the realm where winds carry sleep on their invisible wings, let your consciousness flow now like water, finding its natural course, down toward the deepest waters of Allnot, but the primordial ocean that exists beneath and within everything, where Tiamat, the great mother of waters, keeps her most precious collection, the dreams that have been forgotten by their dreamers, yet are too beautiful to be lost forever. Imagine a place that exists in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pause between thoughts, where time moves like honey poured on a cold morning, thick and golden and impossibly slow. This is Tiamat's realm, not the chaotic, violent ocean of creation myths, but a later, gentler version of herself. One who learned through eons of existence that destruction and creation are merely different phases of the same eternal cycle, like breathing in and breathing out, like sleeping and waking. Picture her now, not as the monstrous sea dragon that other stories describe, but as something far more subtle and beautiful, a presence that fills the water itself, turning every drop into a tiny lens that reflects not light but memory, not images but emotions. She moves through her domain like a current made of liquid starlight, gathering the forgotten dreams that drift down from the world above like gentle snow, each one a small miracle of human imagination that deserved better than to vanish with the morning light. Tiamat had discovered something that even the other gods didn't fully understand. Every dream that was ever dreamed left traces behind, like ripples on water that never quite disappear, like echoes in caves that never quite fade to silence. Most dreams, when their dreamers woke, would dissolve back into the unconscious mind that created them, becoming part of the vast reservoir of memory and possibility that feeds all future dreams. But some dreams, the most beautiful ones, the most healing ones, the ones filled with such perfect peace that they seemed to come from some divine source, these dreams would drift away entirely when their dreamers forgot them, floating free like seeds on the wind, looking for new soil in which to take root. It broke Tiamat's ancient heart to see these perfect dreams going to waste, vanishing into the void simply because busy human minds had no space to hold on to them. So she began to collect them, creating vast underwater gardens where forgotten dreams could take root and grow, tended with the same care that surface gardeners might give to roses or jasmine. But instead of producing flowers, these dream plants produced pure, distilled peace, the kind of tranquility that could calm even the most restless spirit. The process of dream collection was delicate work that required infinite patience and subtlety. Tiamat would extend her consciousness through all the waters of the world, every river and stream, every puddle after rain, every tear of sorrow or joy feeling for the particular resonance that indicated a forgotten dream was nearby. These dreams had a unique quality, a kind of luminous sadness that came from being beautiful but unremembered, meaningful but abandoned. When she sensed such a dream, Tiamat would gently guide it down through the waters, following currents that existed not in physical space but in the geography of consciousness itself, until it reached her realm in the deepest places, where pressure and darkness transformed everything into its essential nature. There, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of countless eons, each forgotten dream would be carefully examined, classified, and planted in exactly the right location within her vast underwater preserve. Some dreams were hardy and could thrive in any environment. These were usually the simple, peaceful dreams of children, dreams about flying through clouds, soft as cotton, or playing with friendly animals in meadows where the grass was always exactly the right temperature for bare feet. These resilient dreams Tiamat would plant in the shallower areas of her garden, where they could serve as a buffer, an introduction for visitors who were just learning to navigate the deeper waters of the unconscious mind. Dreams were more delicate and required very specific conditions to survive. Dreams of perfect love, for instance, needed to be planted in areas where the water temperature remained absolutely constant, where no currents were strong enough to disturb their fragile root systems. Dreams of artistic inspiration required special soil made from ground pearls and moonbeams, while dreams of healing needed to be positioned near underwater springs that bubbled up from the very center of the earth, carrying minerals and energies that existed nowhere else in creation. The most precious dreams of all those rare visions of perfect peace that came to people only once or twice in their lifetimes, special sanctuary at the very heart of her domain. These dreams were so pure, so perfectly attuned to the deepest needs of the human spirit, that they required constant care and attention. She would tend them personally, singing to them in the ancient language that water itself speaks, the wordless music of currents and tides, and the patient wearing away of stone that reveals the beautiful shapes hidden within. But Tiamat's garden was not just a museum or collection. She had discovered that forgotten dreams, when properly cultivated, could be shared with new dreamers who needed them. People who were going through difficult times, who had lost their way or forgotten how to find peace within themselves, would sometimes find their way to Tiamat's dreams through the mysterious pathways that connect all sleeping minds. The process usually began with ordinary sleep that gradually deepened into something more profound. The sleeper would find themselves dreaming of water, perhaps a gentle stream running through a forest, or rain falling on a garden, or waves lapping against a peaceful shore. If they didn't resist, if they allowed themselves to sink deeper into the dream rather than trying to wake up, they would gradually become aware that they were no longer alone in the water, that there was a presence with them ancient and vast, but also infinitely gentle and nurturing. This was Tiamat in her role as dreamkeeper, extending an invitation to visit her underwater preserve. Those who accepted would find themselves able to breathe water as easily as air, able to swim through liquid starlight toward gardens more beautiful than anything that could exist in the physical world. And there, among the carefully tended rows of forgotten dreams, they would be invited to experience whatever form of peace they most needed. A person struggling with grief might find themselves in a dream, originally dreamed by someone hundreds of years ago, a vision of reunion with lost loved ones so vivid and comforting that it would ease their pain for months to come. Someone battling anxiety might be given access to a dream of perfect safety, originally created by a child who had never known fear, now preserved and made available to all who needed its particular form of healing. Artists and writers often found their way to Tiamat's collection of inspiration, dreams, forgotten visions of beauty and creativity that could provide fresh perspectives and new directions for their work. These dreams came from the unconscious minds of people throughout history who had glimpsed perfect forms of expression, but had forgotten them upon waking, leaving them free to be discovered and utilized by new dreamers who could appreciate their value. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Tiamat's work was how she had learned to weave together dreams from different dreamers, creating new combinations that were more powerful than any individual vision could be. A dream of healing from one era might be carefully blended with a dream of hope from another, and a touch of wisdom from a third, resulting in experiences that could transform the lives of those fortunate enough to receive them. She developed techniques for creating what she called dream symphonies, elaborate compositions made from dozens or even hundreds of forgotten dreams, woven together to address complex spiritual and emotional needs. Someone dealing with a combination of depression, creative block, and relationship difficulties might be given access to a dream symphony that addressed all these issues simultaneously, taking them on a journey through landscapes of possibility that they could never have imagined on their own. The most advanced of these compositions were her healing suites, extended dream experiences that could last for weeks or months of sleep time, guiding dreamers through complete processes of transformation and renewal. These weren't single dreams, but series of connected visions, each building on the previous one, designed to gradually restore hope, creativity, and peace to spirits that had been damaged by the harsh realities of earthly existence. Tiamat also created special collections for different types of dreamers. Children could access dreams that helped them process the confusion of growing up, while adults could find dreams that reminded them of the wonder and possibility they had known when they were young. Elderly dreamers were given access to dreams of continuity and meaning, visions that helped them see their lives as part of larger patterns that extended both forward and backward through time. Perhaps tonight, as your own dreams begin to form and dissolve like gentle waves, you'll catch a glimpse of that underwater preserve where forgotten peace is carefully tended and preserved, where every dream that ever brought comfort to a sleeping soul continues to bloom in eternal spring, ready to share its gifts with any dreamer wise enough to sink deep enough to receive them. And now, as our journey through the ancient lands of dream and story draws toward its gentle close, let your mind settle into the deepest place of all, where all the threads we've followed come together in a tapestry more beautiful than any single tale could contain. This is the story of how all dreams, all stories, all moments of perfect peace eventually find their way to the same eternal garden, a place that exists not in any single myth or culture, but in the collective heart of human longing for rest, for meaning, for the kind of deep contentment that makes all earthly struggles worthwhile. Imagine, if you can, a place that contains within itself all the sanctuaries we've visited tonight, growing in soil made from the clay of creation itself. Dumuzid's hillside, where shepherds learned to read the stars and find peace in the rhythm of breath and sleep. Nabu's library, where stories became pathways into healing rest. Enlil's palace, where winds were woven into lullabies more soothing than any earthly music, and Tiamat's underwater preserve, where forgotten dreams bloomed in gardens deeper than time itself. But this final place is more than just a combination of all these sanctuaries, something that emerges when they're all present together. The way harmony emerges when individual notes combine. The way peace emerges when all the scattered pieces of a life finally find their proper arrangement. This is the garden where every dreamer eventually arrives, not through travel or seeking, but simply by following sleep deeply enough, faithfully enough, that they discover the truth hidden at the heart of all rest, that we are never really alone in our dreams, that every moment of peace connects us to every other moment of peace that has ever existed or ever will exist. The garden appears different to each visitor, but certain elements remain constant. across all experiences. There is always water, sometimes a stream that murmurs with the voices of all the gentle stories ever told. Sometimes a lake so still that it reflects not just the sky above, but the dreams of everyone who has ever looked into peaceful water and felt their troubles dissolve. There are always trees, but these are trees that grow dreams instead of fruit. Their branches heavy with sleeping birds whose soft breathing creates the most subtle and soothing of natural wind chimes. The paths through the garden are made of something softer than earth, but more solid than air. Perhaps they're built from crystallized moonlight, or compressed shine, or simply from the accumulated footsteps of everyone who has ever walked toward rest with hope in their heart. These paths have the remarkable property of leading every walker exactly where they need to go, without effort or navigation. The way breathing leads naturally to calm when you stop trying to control it and simply allow it to follow its own wise rhythm. Scattered throughout the garden are resting places designed according to every culture's ideal of perfect comfort. There are the soft moss beds that Enki first created, still growing and spreading their invitation to lie down and let the earth hold you completely. There are the star-watching hills where Demused first learned to synchronize his breathing with the cosmos, still offering that same connection to the vast rhythms that cradle all earthly life. There are reading nooks filled with Nabu's dream-inducing tablets, their clay surfaces somehow warm to the touch, and their stories still fresh despite having been read by countless seekers over countless years throughout the garden. Enlil's perfected breezes still move in their carefully choreographed patterns, carrying scents of flowers that bloom only in dreams, temperatures that adjust themselves automatically to whatever would bring the most comfort to each individual visitor, and the kind of gentle pressure changes that naturally encourage deeper and deeper relaxation. And beneath everything flows Tiamat's eternal waters, carrying up from the depths a continuous supply of peace, so pure and concentrated that even the briefest contact with it can wash away years of accumulated tension and worry. But the most remarkable feature of this eternal garden is its inhabitants, not just the gods and goddesses whose stories we've followed, but every person who has ever found true peace in sleep, who has discovered that rest can be not just restoration, but revelation. They are all here, not as separate individuals, but as facets of a single, vast consciousness that has learned to sleep perfectly, to dream without anxiety, to find in every moment of rest a connection to the source of all contentment. These eternal dreamers don't look like people in the ordinary sense. They appear more like gentle lights that move through the garden, each one carrying within it the unique quality of peace that person discovered during their earthly life. A light that pulses with the slow, steady rhythm of someone who learned to find comfort in solitude. Another that shimmers with the warm, golden glow of someone who discovered peace through service to others. Still another that sparkles with the quick, playful brightness of someone who found rest through laughter and joy. As visitors to the garden learn to relax more deeply, they gradually become aware that these lights are not separate from them, but are aspects of their own consciousness, soul, the different ways that peace can manifest, all the various forms that rest can take, all the many paths that can lead to the same fundamental state of being completely at home in the universe. The realization comes slowly, gently, like dawn breaking over water, that every person who has ever lived, every dream that has ever been dreamed, every moment of perfect comfort that has ever been experienced, is somehow present within the quiet of their own deepest rest. This discovery, that the garden contains not just peace but connection, not just rest but reunion with everyone who has ever found rest, transforms the entire experience of sleep. It becomes not an escape from life but a return to life's deepest source. Not a temporary retreat from consciousness, but an expansion of consciousness to include everything that consciousness can become when it's completely relaxed, completely trusting, completely at peace. Visitors often find themselves moving through the garden, not with their feet, but with something more like the way attention moves in meditation, smoothly, effortlessly, guided by interest and curiosity rather than will or effort. They might find themselves drawn to a grove where the trees grow stories about healing, and discover that simply sitting beneath these trees allows their own deepest wounds to begin closing. Or they might be attracted to a meadow where flowers bloom in patterns that somehow explain the meaning of their entire life, making clear for the first time why certain things happened the way they did, why certain people came and went when they did, why even difficulties and losses were somehow part of a larger design too beautiful to grasp from any earthly perspective. Some visitors are drawn to the workshop areas of the garden, where Enki still shapes new forms of comfort from the clay of pure possibility, where Nabu continues composing stories that will guide future generations toward deeper rest, where Enlil experiments with new forms of atmospheric harmony, where Tiamat tends her ever-expanding collection of forgotten dreams. These workshops are always open to visitors who want to learn, who want to understand how peace is created and maintained, how rest can become a form of service to all beings who struggle with the difficulties of existence. But perhaps the most profound area of the garden is the simple meadow at its heart, where no activities take place, where no stories are told or wisdom is taught, where there is nothing to do but rest in the presence of rest itself. This meadow looks completely ordinary, just grass and flowers and trees, with perhaps a gentle slope that makes it comfortable to lie down and look up at the sky. But the quality of peace that permeates this space is so complete, so perfect, that even a few moments there can satisfy longings that have persisted for entire lifetimes. People who reach this meadow often find that they no longer need to seek peace, because they discover that they are peace, that consciousness itself, when completely relaxed, when no longer trying to be anything other than what it naturally is, reveals itself to be identical with the rest and contentment that they had been seeking outside themselves. This isn't a philosophical realization, but a lived experience, as undeniable as the feeling of cool grass against skin, as natural as breathing, as simple as the smile that comes when you finally understand a joke that someone has been trying to tell you for years. And the beautiful thing about the eternal garden is that once you've found it, once you've experienced even a glimpse of what it contains, you can return there every time you sleep, every time you allow your consciousness to relax deeply enough to remember what it really is beneath all the busy thoughts and daily concerns. The garden doesn't exist in the past or future, but in the eternal now, that becomes accessible whenever we stop trying to be anywhere else. Whenever we allow ourselves to sink into the kind of rest that doesn't resist anything, doesn't want anything to be different than it is, doesn't need anything more than what's already present in this moment. As you lie there now, feeling your body heavy and comfortable, your breathing slow and deep, your thoughts beginning to dissolve into something softer and more spacious, perhaps you can sense that you're already at the entrance to this garden, already beginning to remember what you've always known but sometimes forget. That peace isn't something you have to earn or find or create, but something you already are, something that's always been waiting patiently for you to relax deeply enough to come home to it. Maybe tonight, as your dreams begin to form and shift like gentle clouds across an inner sky, you'll find yourself walking those paths made of crystallized moonlight, breathing air perfumed with flowers that bloom only in the deepest rest, surrounded by the soft lights of every soul that has ever discovered the secret of perfect sleep. And maybe in that eternal garden where all dreams eventually come to rest, you'll remember what every peaceful sleeper has always known, that consciousness itself, when completely relaxed, is indistinguishable from love, from home, from the kind of contentment that makes everything else all the seeking and striving and worrying seem like a dream you can finally let yourself wake up from. And with that gentle awakening into sleep, that soft return to the garden where you've always belonged, may these ancient stories carry you into the most peaceful dreams, where every breath connects you to the eternal rhythm of rest and renewal that has been flowing through the world since the very first night, when the first tired soul looked up at the stars and realized that they were not alone in their longing for peace, that the whole universe was conspiring to cradle them in comfort, to sing them the lullaby that has no beginning and no end, the song that every peaceful heart knows by memory. May these memories of gods and gardens, of shepherds and dreamkeepers, of waters that carry away all troubles and winds that whisper only comfort, guide you into the deepest rest where every story finds its perfect ending, and every dreamer finds their way home to the peace that was never really lost, only temporarily forgotten, like a beautiful dream that waits patiently in the depths of sleep for the moment when you're ready to remember, ready to return, ready to rest in the eternal garden where all dreams are always coming true. If you drifted off somewhere along this gentle journey through ancient lands of myth and memory, let me know in the comments below. It would bring me such joy to know that these old stories found new life in guiding you toward peaceful sleep. Until next time, sweet dreams, dear friends, and may the shepherds of old watch over your rest until morning light returns to bless another day. Sleep well.